Well, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari is back in the country after a week-long engagement at the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Now, during his address at the August session, he called the attention of world leaders to the impact of COVID-19 on debt servicing by many countries. President Buhari is seeking a review of the eligibility criteria for debt suspension and outright cancellation for developing and least developed countries. Steve Osho, co-managing partner at Commercial Partners, joins me to discuss this and other stories. Steve, thank you for joining us today. Now, President Buhari argues that the COVID-19 pandemic is making debt servicing a lot more difficult for developing and least developed countries, and is actually also calling for an outright cancellation of debt. We've been here before. If you recall the Paris Club, it's been several years, but it will look like, just looking at where we are in terms of external and domestic debts, the picture is the same now. But is that a strong enough argument for an outright debt cancellation?
Thank you, Esther, for having me this afternoon. I think it's coming at the right time from the President of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, in terms of the intent in cancellations of debt on the back of all the issue that we've had over the negative impact of COVID-19. But I think as a nation, as a country, we actually need to make strong, engagement with the multilateral body and the UN to be able to write off some of these loans. Like you alluded to, in 2005, I think we have the Paris Agreement, which took up roughly about 18 to 30 billion debt from Nigeria portfolio. And that helped us a lot. So if you look at where we stand today from our debt structure, debt service to revenue is increasing and is actually at the point where the government is getting so worried. And if you look at the external debt that we have, standing at March 2021, the number published by DMO, standing roughly around $82 billion, which form roughly about 42% of the total debt, both local and external. And if you strip that out, it means that we have roughly 42% of that portfolio representing our total debt. And standing at present level that we have, 33 trillion naira in terms of public debt, I think it's the high time that government started looking at other ways they can, find to reduce the burden of this debt on them. But I think at this point, if you look at what the president is talking about, the one you'll be able to actually seek a relief on will probably be the one to have under the multilateral and the bilateral agreement or the bilateral loans. The one you actually raise from the debt capital markets by Eurobond, you still have to go on and service that in the long run. But if you look at that portfolio from the multilateral and the bilateral agreement, I think it would say that if that amount actually if that request could be considered, it means that a lot of the size of portfolio we have, which roughly about 42%, if you add the last, the amount that was actually raised from the capital market, about 4 billion, then it's going to be very significant in terms of consideration.
Now, still on this cancellation of debt, I'm sure you remember the World Bank's debt service suspension initiative. There are two schools of thought on the success of it. Many, well, from what I've seen, have declared that it did fail. It wasn't very successful because at the end of the day, the World Bank had trouble getting on board private creditors, private individuals to participate, because at the end of the day, they argue that, look, they're a business, they need the loans that they've given, they need them back. So do you think that the fact that we had the debt service suspension, could we take that as a signal that, look, there is no appetite for debt cancellation? Well, we can suspend your debt, but we cannot cancel your debt. So for Nigeria, in terms of expectations, can we expect that to be our response in the medium to long term, that maybe perhaps we can suspend the debt? I'm talking about President Buhari's call now at August session. Maybe we suspend your debt, but in terms of outright cancellation, that's probably not in the cards. What are your thoughts?
Well, like I said, I think it's going to be a long debate, and we have to have a very strong argument, for these bodies to be able to consider your request. For suspension, I think they've done that during the period of the COVID lockdown and the impact of that on major economy across the world. and Africa are not, exempted, and Nigeria not exempted from all those problems we have, going down in terms of all the economic parameters and how we've gone into recession within the period, and how it's becoming so troublesome and practically impossible for some of these countries to pay or to service their loans. I think the suspension is more like a better argument, but in terms of cancellation, it's going to have a very logical and strong reason for them to look at that, and that consultation would happen once you can present and you can convince these bodies. Like I said, the last time we had that was 2005, and that was a strong economic footprint to show that we're going in that direction.
Steve, I'm sorry, Steve, if I could just come in here, we have just 2 minutes left, talking about showing a strong will on the part of the government. As you know, the government has the twin problem of low revenues and a high debt stock. So many analysts that I've spoken to keep saying that, look, as far as these international donors, the likes of the IMF, World Bank, and the rest of multilaterals are concerned, Nigeria still needs to take those very difficult fiscal reforms. We're talking about, we're still on a few subsidies. That is impacting. And these are decisions that the government is yet to take. So putting that side by side with the call for debt cancellation, what are your thoughts?
Well, exactly. I think you just took the word out of my mouth, because for me, the government has to show a very strong commitment towards the economic reform from the fiscal side. We'll see a lot of things happening through the monetary policy side. But again, we have to find a way to be able to harmonize that monetary policies and fiscal policy authorities to get to the point where we're actually making a strong argument for the debt cancellations. So at this point, I don't think that is happening yet. And if you look at even the way the IMF, the UN actually been pressuring the government in terms of, pricing the naira at the fair valuation, getting the fair valuation of the currency is another point, that we have to consider. And in terms of all the debts that we've raised over time for infrastructural development, we still have a lot of gap in that space that we can't really account for. So I think those are the things that would come to the table when it comes to discussion around debt cancellation.
Steve, I must thank you for your time today. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Steve Osho, co-managing partner at Commercial Partners.